Hi, everybody. This is Lowell, and we're talking about music theory and, in particular, harmony. And we were talking about the other day how there were passageways from one types of tonal center to another. And there are a couple of chords that are super important in terms of making that transition. And you hear this all the time in classical music, but also in jazz and other forms of music that we have in our pop culture today. But in my opinion, the two most important and most prevalently used passageway chords are what we call the diminished seventh and the dominant seventh. And I'm going to talk about seventh chords in general today, but I'm starting out by highlighting these two chords. And the dominant seven is, you can do this on any of the 12 tonal centers that people call them keys. Each one of these have their own chord that you can use for that. But I'm just using C major for the sake of simplicity of writing. And so you have C, E, G, and B flat, and that sounds like this, which is very common. And so notice how it really makes you feel like you want to go from C dominant 7 to the key of F, right? So you have C dominant 7 to F, and then you can have F dominant 7 to B flat. And so the dominant 7 really pushes you into the next key, and we talked about the circle of fifths. And so that's what happens when you put a dominant 7, is it basically, whatever chord you're on, it becomes the 5 of the next key. So the dominant 7 is very important. The diminished seventh is also, which is right here, highly important. And so the diminished 7 leads you to, it's kind of like the first of two different possible chords that throws you into any number of different keys. And so the diminished 7 is C, E flat, G flat, and B double flat. And you can spell this in a lot of different ways, but just for the sake of teaching, and this sounds like this. All right, so that is a super important first of two chords that can throw you in a lot of different key directions. And so this is C, E flat, G flat, A double flat. But then if you change one of these notes, one of these four notes, then it triggers you going into another key. So listen to this change. So here's the diminished seventh, and then I change this one note, and that all of a sudden, and that makes you that becomes a dominant 7, and so that makes you want to go into so that's a C. Where am I? So actually it's A flat dominant 7, and then throws you into wanting to go to the key of D flat. Right? So you have those four notes, you change that one note. Here's another note you can change. I changed that one note, and so now that turns that into an F dominant 7, and now you want to go to B flat. See how that works? And so here's another option. Right? I changed that note, and now that makes you want to go to. Sorry, I haven't really practiced this. But anyway, so that becomes D dominant 7. Right? And so you just change any one of these notes. Right? And so that's changing this note. So that's B7 to E. All right, so that's just one. Okay, think of it this way: there are 12 notes in the scale that we can pull from, and so 12 keys, right? And so right here, this dominant or this diminished 7, we're using only 4 of those, and so if there's 4, then 4 times 3 is 12. So there's 3 different versions of this. All right, and so what I just showed you with this one chord, with those 4 notes, I showed you 4 different keys that it can throw you into. All right, and so this is one of 3. Diminished 7 chords, and so you can use any of those 3 to do exactly what I just showed you, and so that completes the other 8 keys that you can go to. So it's a highly effective chord to make transitions harmonically around the circle of fifths, and even if you're in a very remote location away from some key that you want to go to, you can use the diminished 7 to throw you into any one of those keys. I want to introduce at the end of this video now the subject of 7th chords, and we'll talk about jazz harmony in a little bit in another version of these videos. But essentially what we're doing is we're stacking various thirds, and there are 2 different types of thirds. There's a minor third and a major third. And so if you have a minor third as a building block or a major third as a building block, then you can stack them in different ways. And so, and this is kind of how jazz works, is you stack thirds on top of each other in various forms. But right now we're talking about the 7ths. And so the nomenclature of how we call these is based upon the interval, the space from the root of the chord to the 7th step. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from here to here. Okay, that determines if it's a major 7th or a minor 7th. Okay, or a diminished 7th. So that's how we name these. It's from the root. Okay, and so here's your dominant 7th, which actually has a minor 7th in it, but we call this dominant 7. We just talked about this. All right, but here's the major 7th, and so there's a major 7 interval from the tonic, or from the root of that chord to the 7th. So that sounds like that. That's major 7th. And then here's another very popular one, is minor 7th, which is a minor triad at the bottom, and then the minor 7th from the C to the B flat. And then here's a minor major 7th, kind of a combination of those. And then here's diminished 7th. We talked about that quite a bit just a minute ago. And then here's half diminished 7th. So notice that the 7th is raised from the diminished. So, and then here's somebody asked me the other day, a student asked me the other day, is there any such thing as an augmented 7th chord? And there's really not, because if you augment the 7th, here's the major 7th, right? And so if I augment the 7th to, a half step higher, then what does it become? An octave. So that just puts it back into a major chord. But the closest thing that you can come to in terms of an augmented 7th would be if you sharp the 5. So here's that major 7th, and then I'm going to sharp the 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this note, I'm going to change that note to this to raise it and sharp it. Okay, that's used in jazz quite a bit. So it's a major 7 sharp 5, and then here's just a dominant 7 sharp 5. Again, it's used in jazz quite a bit. So that's a brief description of the 7th chords, and we'll talk about jazz harmony a little bit later. And today particularly I wanted to highlight the dominant seven and the diminished seven, and how important it is in terms of modulating around the circle of fifths and around all the different keys. Hope that helps.